For years I was completely convinced that seaweed was the gold standard for adding ocean minerals to my garden. I'd spend money sourcing kelp meal, liquid seaweed extracts and dried seaweed products, believing that nothing else could replicate what the ocean offered. But as I dug deeper into soil science and sustainable sourcing, a troubling reality emerged. The more seaweed I was using in my garden, the more I realized I was participating in an industry that was quietly stripping our oceans of vital ecosystems. The carbon footprint of harvesting, processing and shipping seaweed across the globe was, honestly, staggering. And then came the real wake-up call. I discovered that some of the most mineral-rich soil amendments were literally beneath my feet, in terrestrial sources that regenerate naturally and don't require harvesting from fragile marine environments. Today, I'm sharing the comprehensive guide to finding exceptional ocean-like mineral profiles using land-based sources, and the results in my garden have been just as stunning, if not better. When we think about seaweed harvesting, most gardeners don't consider the ecological impact. Seaweed forests are living ecosystems that support incredible marine biodiversity. Fish, crustaceans, and countless other organisms depend on these underwater gardens for survival. When we harvest seaweed at scale, which is what commercial seaweed production requires, we're disrupting these ecosystems. Some regions have already seen concerning declines in wild seaweed populations, and marine biologists are raising alarms about the long-term sustainability of commercial seaweed harvesting. But the ecological cost is just one piece of the puzzle. There's also the practical matter of logistics. Seaweed is harvested primarily in coastal regions, which means it must be processed, dried or processed into liquid form, and then shipped, often internationally, to reach gardeners inland. Every step adds carbon emissions and energy consumption. A bag of kelp meal that costs $15 represents not just the harvesting cost but also significant processing and transportation infrastructure. When you break down the actual nutrient content and cost per unit compared to terrestrial alternatives, seaweed becomes far less economical than many gardeners realize. Additionally, seaweed sourcing has become increasingly unreliable. Climate change is affecting ocean temperatures and nutrient cycles, which impacts seaweed growth and availability. Supply chain disruptions have become more common, and prices have fluctuated significantly. I've had seasons where my preferred seaweed products became unavailable or prohibitively expensive. This inconsistency forced me to seek alternatives that were more stable, locally available, and sustainable. What I discovered was far more valuable than I expected. The earth beneath our feet contains incredible mineral wealth that accumulated over millions of years. Volcanic rock deposits, glacial sediments, and ancient mineral beds represent nature's own nutrient banks, slowly accessible, incredibly diverse, and available without harvesting living ecosystems. Understanding where these terrestrial minerals come from helps us appreciate their potential in our gardens. Rock dust, also called rock flour or mineral flour, is perhaps the most transformative land-based alternative to seaweed. It's created by grinding rocks, often granite, basalt, or other volcanic minerals, into fine particles. This process mimics natural weathering that occurs over centuries, but accelerates it dramatically. When rock dust is added to soil, it begins weathering immediately, releasing minerals like silica, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and trace elements. The beauty of rock dust is that it works synergistically with soil microbes. The beneficial bacteria and fungi in living soil actually accelerate the weathering process, making minerals available to plants faster than weathering alone would accomplish. Basalt rock dust deserves special attention because of its incredibly broad mineral profile. Basalt is an iron-rich volcanic rock that contains nearly every element plants need in trace quantities. When I switched to basalt rock dust as my primary mineral amendment, I noticed improvements in overall plant vigor that rivaled, and in many cases exceeded, what I'd achieved with seaweed. The silica content in basalt strengthens plant cell walls, making plants more resistant to pests and diseases. The iron content creates deeper green foliage. The calcium and magnesium support flowering and fruit development, and the trace minerals fill gaps that standard fertilizers often miss. Glacial rock flour is another extraordinary option, particularly if you're in a region with glacial history. Glaciers are nature's grinding mills, pulverizing rock over thousands of years as they move across the landscape. The sediment left behind when glaciers retreat contains an unparalleled diversity of finely ground minerals. Glacial flour has a finer particle size than many other rock dusts, which means faster weathering and quicker nutrient availability. I've tested glacial flour in side-by-side comparisons with seaweed, and the results were remarkably similar, with glacial flour often producing superior results in terms of plant mineral content. Now let's talk specifics about which terrestrial minerals work best for different gardening scenarios and how to apply them effectively. The key is understanding that these aren't quick-fix fertilizers. They're long-term soil-building amendments that improve soil fertility year after year. Basalt rock dust is my go-to recommendation for general soil improvement. I apply it at a rate of 1 to 2 pounds per 100 square feet of garden bed, worked into the top 4 to 6 inches of soil. This rate is aggressive enough to significantly improve mineral content while remaining cost-effective. For intensive vegetable gardening, I use the higher rate. For less demanding applications like ornamental planting, I use the lower rate. The effect compounds over years. As the basalt weathering accelerates through microbial activity, minerals become increasingly available. Glacial rock flour works similarly, but can be applied at slightly higher rates due to its finer particle size and broader mineral distribution. I use 2 to 3 pounds per 100 square feet, particularly in spring before planting season. The finer particles mean it integrates into soil more quickly, so I see results faster than with coarser rock dusts. This makes it particularly valuable if you're starting with significantly depleted soil. Granite dust is another excellent option, particularly for its potassium content. While basalt and glacial flour are more balanced, granite dust shines when you're specifically trying to boost potassium levels for fruiting plants like tomatoes and peppers. I'll use granite dust alongside other rock amendments, perhaps at a rate of half to 1 pound per 100 square feet, specifically targeting beds where I'm growing heavy feeders. For calcium and magnesium supplementation without relying on mined minerals like lime, consider locally sourced options like crushed oyster shells or mineral-rich wood ash from hardwood fires. Oyster shells provide calcium at a slow, steady rate. One application per year at about 1 pound per 100 square feet keeps calcium levels steady without the pH swings you might get from lime. Wood ash from hardwoods avoids softwoods and treated wood, adds potassium, calcium, and other minerals while raising pH moderately. I use it sparingly, about half a pound per 100 square feet, because it's potent and can shift pH quickly. The real power emerges when you combine these terrestrial sources into a diverse mineral program. Instead of relying on a single seaweed product, I now blend several rock amendments based on my soil test results. This creates a mineral profile that actually exceeds what seaweed alone could provide, with the added benefit of targeting my soil's specific deficiencies. Here's the critical insight that separates successful mineral amendment from disappointing results. Rocks and minerals alone don't guarantee thriving gardens. You need to unlock the mineral potential through biological activity. This is where the integration of living soil practices becomes essential. Terrestrial minerals like rock dust are only as effective as the soil biology supporting their weathering process. Mycorrhizal fungi and bacteria speed up mineral release from rock particles by producing acids and compounds that accelerate weathering. This means that simply adding rock dust to dead, biologically inactive soil will produce disappointing results. The minerals will eventually become available through slow chemical weathering, but the process takes months or years rather than weeks. This is why I always combine mineral additions with aggressive organic matter building. Every time I add rock dust, I'm also adding compost, leaf mold, or aged manure. These organic amendments feed the microbial populations that make minerals available. I'm essentially creating the conditions where rock dust becomes optimally effective. The synergy between organic matter and mineral amendments creates a virtuous cycle. Microbes feed on organic matter and produce compounds that weather minerals, making them available to plants, which then create more root exudates that feed microbes further. Additionally, understanding that terrestrial minerals provide a slower, steadier nutrient release than processed seaweed products means adjusting your expectations about timelines. Seaweed extracts are processed for quick absorption. Rock dust minerals become available gradually over months. This is actually an advantage because it creates sustained nutrient availability without the feast and famine cycles that liquid amendments can create. Plants respond to this steady availability with more consistent, vigorous growth. The transition from seaweed-dependent gardening to terrestrial mineral sourcing represents more than just a practical substitution, it's a philosophical shift toward truly regenerative gardening. You're choosing to work with minerals that cycle naturally without disrupting marine ecosystems. You're sourcing materials that are often locally available, reducing carbon footprint and supporting local economies. You're building soil fertility that improves year after year rather than requiring constant external inputs. Start by getting a comprehensive soil test that includes not just NPK, but also micronutrients like magnesium, calcium, iron, manganese, and boron. This test tells you exactly which terrestrial mineral sources will most benefit your specific soil. If you're low in potassium, prioritize granite dust. If magnesium is deficient, focus on glacial flour or specific magnesium-rich basalt sources. This targeted approach is more effective than randomly applying various amendments. Source locally whenever possible. Many regions have local rock quarries, aggregate suppliers, or even recycled material centers that carry rock dust and mineral amendments at a fraction of the cost of processed seaweed products. Building relationships with these local suppliers creates resilience in your gardening system. You're not dependent on global supply chains or international shipping. Document your results. Track which terrestrial minerals produce the best results in your specific garden conditions. Over time, you'll develop an intuitive sense of what your soil needs and where to source it sustainably. You become not just a gardener, but a soil steward, actively building fertility in a way that aligns with ecological health. The future of gardening isn't about relying on single miracle amendments, whether seaweed or otherwise. It's about understanding your soil's unique needs and meeting them with locally available, sustainably sourced materials that build long-term fertility. Terrestrial minerals represent an incredible opportunity to garden abundantly while treading lightly on our planet. The ocean can continue flourishing without harvesting its forests, and your garden can thrive through the ancient wealth hidden in the earth beneath your feet. Subscribe to the Living Soil Lab for more deep dives into sustainable gardening, soil science, and practical methods for building truly living soil. Share this guide with gardeners in your community who are ready to move beyond seaweed and discover the mineral richness available through terrestrial sources. Together we're building gardens that are not just productive but genuinely regenerative, healing both our soil and our planet, one mineral-rich garden bed at a time.